Well, after some of those stories, I think they've made some points that I'll go through as we go through this, but after seeing a lot of proposals and a lot of funded projects and doing quite a few projects on my own and getting them funded, we've kind of come up with some war stories that cover a lot of the tips and tricks and the problems that we've seen and why proposals have gotten rejected or why people have had problems with projects. I've got a pretty extensive experience in the SBIR program. I've been funded by numerous agencies. I've run a couple companies, and I'm now doing SBIR technical assistance through the SBDC and through the research part. And so this is kind of a little bit of my background and why I might actually know some of this stuff. First, I want to talk about the stuff that you need to do before you start writing proposals. So the pre-proposal stuff. I think Bill was talking about having a long-term strategy. Understand how you're going to use grants to help your company. You may have a plan that you're going to try and just fund everything based on SBIR. If so, you want to generate boilerplates so you can do proposals more easily. Do your research ahead of time. Make sure you understand what the agencies are and who you're going after. Just think about that stuff before you get started. Start early. The registrations can be slow. They're an iterative process. You need to get them in. So, the sooner you start ahead of time, the better off you'll be. I've seen people miss deadlines by 15 minutes and then not be able to apply for another year. So do your homework, get things started early, understand what you need to do. If you can contact the technical contact, which you can do with all of the DoD branches during their pre-submission process, it's highly recommended that you talk to them if you can. I've found the NIH is extremely helpful in helping you plan the direction of your proposal and think about your topic in terms of their mission. And sometimes they'll even say, well, this isn't something I would fund, but there's somebody else I know that might, and they'll put you in contact with other people. So any chance you can to get in touch with the technical contacts, you should do that. And do it early because they run out of time and then you won't be able to talk to them. Don't focus on writing initially. Spend some time doing some research and information gathering first. Understand how your technology or your idea can be applied to broader impacts. Really think about this in terms of where your business is going to go and what type of funding strategy you have. Read the solicitation. Pay attention to the details. There are things like font requirements and page requirements and margin requirements. All of these can be used in the administrative review process to reject your proposal if you don't do them right. Use the subject headings that they have. All of these little details are in the solicitation. They vary a little bit by agency, but it's important to go through those details or you're going to get your proposal rejected without any review at all on technical merit. Ask for help. There are lots of resources in this community. I can give you consulting time. There are other consultants here in town that work with the companies. There are a lot of the companies that have been successful in the past are more than happy to talk to you about their experiences and help you prepare a proposal that's going to be successful. Use those resources. Connect yourself with credentials. I think all three people on the panel have had connections with the university. They use these connections with the university. Brag about the fact that we have a research park here that you're either part of or going to be part of if you get funded. Leverage all of that stuff. If you have a professor that you've been working with, use their name. It's important to look like a credible company. If you do have a university partner, start the process even earlier because you're going to have to send your proposal in to the grants management people. You're going to have to get letters of support. All of that stuff takes extra long, so give yourself a couple extra weeks if there is a university partner. Remember that phase one is a demonstration of feasibility. Make sure your project is scoped this way. Make sure you're going to do something in that 6 months that shows why your idea is a good idea and why they should fund it. We see lots of proposals where the scope is just way too much, and I'll mention that again. You really need to understand how you're going to show them that this is a feasible idea in a short period of time for not much money. Proposal writing. Once you start writing the proposal, the first thing you need to think about, especially if you're a university-side researcher, is this is not an academic treatise. This is not your typical grant proposal that goes to NIH or NSF. It's a sales document. You're trying to convince these people that you've got an idea that fits their mission. You're the right people to do it. You have the right expertise, the right experience, the right team, the right facilities and equipment, and that you understand the cost proposal. It's all about credibility. Really needs to be a sales document that covers all aspects of it and makes them feel nice and warm about you doing their project. It's all about credibility. On every one of these steps, it's all about credibility. We've heard of reviewers sitting in the room and they don't believe this is really a company, so they go look for a website. They don't find a website. Their email address is a Gmail account. All of these things are little things that if you do your homework and you put a little extra time into it, you can look like a much more credible company. When we started out with Caviton, there were 2 of us, and we had to find a way to make it look like we're a real company, and we did so by having a scientific advisory board and a business advisory board, and then all of a sudden you've got a lot of credentials associated with you, and you look like a much more credible company. Address potential larger impacts. Don't just address what the narrow project is. Let them know that you've thought about how this is going to apply to your business and how you're going to take this money and turn it into a small business that's successful in making money. That's the whole point of the SBIR program. Focus on uniqueness and innovation. This is the Small Business Innovative Research Program. Most of the proposals that we see rejected are rejected because they are not innovative. It's the easiest way for them to get rid of your proposal. So you really need to prove why this is different. There's a phrase that I hear way too often from the program managers: this can't be an incremental increase to an existing technology. This has to be something unique and innovative. NIH now has $5,000 that you can apply for commercialization and marketing help. Go ahead and do that. It doesn't cost you anything, and you get $5,000 worth of advice from somebody who can help. The abstract is critical. A lot of the reviewers, the only thing they're going to read this whole time is the abstract. You really need to have other people review it, make sure it's understandable, make sure it gets the point across, make sure you demonstrate that this is an innovative idea. And then Roland pointed out that sometimes if you have a nice abstract, you can also use this to attract partners, and if you have partners in the corporate world, you look more credible. And I think Catalan's one of the real good examples of that. They've got a bunch of corporate partners, and so they look like a very credible company. Always have somebody review your proposal. I've seen too many proposals where nobody's looked at it at all, and by the time you've written this thing and put that much effort into it, it's really hard to read it again and understand what you've written and make sure you're getting your point across. So have somebody else review it. Have them review it in 2 different ways. Have them look at spelling and grammar and wording and things like that, but also have them go through and make sure that the technical part of it is sound and understandable, and it's clear that it's innovative again. When I write proposals, the first thing that I do is put together the figures. I make sure that the figures tell the complete story, because a lot of the times the reviewers, if they like your abstract, will just look through the figures and see if they can get the point of your project. I think you need to have figures that demonstrate key points, demonstrate impact, and I think figures should have self-contained figure headings that tell the whole story of the figure without having to go back and look in the text. I think it's just a sound practice in writing proposals. Again, bring in fresh people to review your proposal. When you have it done, make sure somebody goes over it and understands what your point is and helps you get your point across. Always keep the abstract in layman's terms. You need to get your point across. It can't have a bunch of acronyms in it. It really needs to be very clear and understandable, because there are a lot of reviewers that's all they're going to look at. Always spell out acronyms the first time you use them. This one gets a little bit weird when you're doing software stuff, because do you really want to spell out HTML or FTP? Because most people don't know what the words are behind the acronyms. But in most things, you need to not use jargon and make things clear and spell out acronyms. Nowadays, with commercialization plans, theoretical markets aren't sufficient anymore. You need to really do some research, understand what the market is, understand what part of that market you're addressing. You really need to build a case for this being a successful company. I think if you do things in kind of a top-down, here's the huge market that I can address, but also bottom-up, here's a specific case, and here's how much money I would make, and then here's how those relate, I think you can make a pretty good case for commercialization plan. Don't overscope the project. We see way too many. The first one that I put in was to the EPA, and I said I was going to solve the world's pollution problems for $60,000 in 6 months, and it was rejected soundly. You really need to have a reasonable amount of work for the amount of money and the amount of time you're putting in, and we see way too many that are just way over the top. On the cost proposal, we have a few tips that we've been talking about. One is, if your project's mostly going to be direct labor anyway, just use a single overhead rate. Keep your cost proposal simple and clean, and we can help you get those set up pretty easily. Don't waste too much time thinking about it without talking to somebody who's done one, because they can be very simple. When you're doing your cost proposal, you want to use actual numbers for costs. Don't estimate things. Have quotes and justifications for why you did all these things, and it makes your cost proposal go through much easier, and it's just a cleaner way of doing things. So this is one of those questions. NIH and NSF have safe rates for indirect rates, and if you use those, it's easy, but they're probably lower than what your actual rates will be. So you kind of have to decide. If you use the safe rate, that's fine. You can go through with it, and it's all right. But if your real rate's much higher, go ahead and negotiate with them, and eventually you can get them to agree to most things, as long as you have it spelled out and clean and you can justify it. So, this one, maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. It depends on how much negotiation you want to do. Support letters. I think most of the agencies now really rely on support letters. I think NSF almost requires that you have 3 support letters. You're probably going to be the one writing the support letter and then sending it to somebody to have them sign it. So think about, how to make it really a good, strong support letter, and make sure that the person who is signing it is somebody who has the authority to do it, because you don't want them to. You need to ask for support letters early, because what tends to happen is you find somebody who says, oh yeah, I support your project and I'd love to give you a support letter. You send it to them and they panic a little bit and they aren't sure they have the authority to sign it, and then things get pushed around, and it really ends up being hard to do at the last minute. And a lot of people don't really even think about the support letters till a couple days before it's due, and then it's really hard to get them. It just, every time I've had to do it, it's been hard. If you can get support letters that cover the financial aspects of whatever your proposed product is, the scientific feasibility of this thing, and some sort of commercial letter, if you really cover all of those business aspects, it really looks good. Sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes these projects are way too early to do things like that. But if you have a venture capital group that says they're going to fund it, and you've got somebody who says they're going to buy it, and you have somebody that says this is a really sound technology, I think it makes a huge difference. Reviewers' comments, as you heard from the panel, sometimes you get really good comments and you can integrate them and make a much better proposal. Sometimes they aren't very helpful at all, but you need to understand that the success rate for phase ones is something around 15%. So you're probably not going to get funded the first time you put one in. You need to really have thick skin and keep trying and trying if you want to play this game. It's hard, but it's also non-dilutive funding, and you can bring in a lot of money for neat projects and do things for a long time if you want to. But don't get discouraged if you get rejected. Go through the comments, see if you can understand what their point was, and try and fix things and send it back in. That's all I've got for that stuff. Here's my contact information. Cogent Innovations helps people write SBIR proposals and manage projects, and I help with other business aspects also. I do have some consulting time through the SBDC through the grant that this workshop was part of, and I also do SBIR technical assistance at the research park, and Roland and I are iStart providers, and so we can be contracted through the iStart program also. Any questions about any of those specific topics?
I haven't attended the first or second of these sessions, so I might be asking a question that's already been dealt with.
No problem.
Does your intellectual property have to be exposed like it might be if you were pursuing a patent or something like that?
So this is a tricky thing. You need to have enough technical detail in the proposal that they can understand what you're doing. So a lot of the times when we've written them, we've given them enough that they can understand what you're doing, but don't give them the secret stuff. You're also allowed to mark things as proprietary, and you should do that. You aren't allowed to mark the whole document as proprietary, so just the sections that you will. But you know, that's always a trick, is you don't want to give away all your secrets, but you have to give them enough information that they can know what you're doing.
In your previous slide, you mentioned about 50% of the proposals get accepted. So a lot of times in academic papers, there's 2 reviewers, and if you don't get it in, you can resubmit it. There'll be 2 different reviewers. Is the same case here, where there's a huge pool of reviewers and you get some subset of that?
It varies by agency. Is there a specific agency that you're interested in?
Well, I know, like NSF, for instance, you usually have the same people because you're going with the
Right.
same group.
Yeah. Whereas NIH, you may resubmit and get a totally different panel of people. DOD, you're never quite sure who's reviewing them. It really varies. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, well, that wraps it up then. Thanks for coming out, and thanks for the SBDC to sponsor this.